Elagabalus, also known as Elagabalus, the Roman emperor who held the throne from 218 to 222 AD. He was widely recognized for his controversial and eccentric behavior. Assuming the throne at a mere age of 14, his short but chaotic reign is infamous for causing religious and social unrest, engaging in scandalous conduct, and indulging in lavish practices. He held the esteemed position of high priest for the sun god Elagabal, but when he ascended to the throne as emperor, he endeavored to usurp Jupiter and put Elagabal on the throne as the principal deity of the Roman pantheon. His rule was characterized by excessive opulence and unpredictability. It is reported that he married and divorced 5 times. He also offered ridiculous amounts of public money for the secret recipe of a distinctive sauce that he liked, and he purportedly filled the palace with live snakes and lions to intimidate his visitors, all in good fun. His extravagant lifestyle included organizing opulent and morally objectionable banquets that greatly surprised and disgusted the Roman nobility. There are even reports of him selling his body within the imperial palace, and in addition to that, he defied the social conventions of Rome by adorning himself with cosmetics and garments typically associated with women. In fact, he went so far to pursue the risky surgical procedure of a gender change. Well, this kind of behavior and the enforcement of his religious changes caused the influential Praetorian Guard, the Senate, and the general population to become distant and disconnected. Due to his complete disregard for Roman religious tradition and the empire's conservative values, he was assassinated by his own guards at the age of 18. Subsequently, his memory was swiftly condemned to oblivion through damnatio memoriae, that is, the removal or changing of statues, also writing you out of history as much as they possibly can. Your memory be damned. Well, the reign of Elagabalus, although very short, certainly was an interesting one. And if you want to learn more about it, if that introduction didn't get you interested already, well, you sure are in the right place. To the newcomers, welcome to the channel, and to those returning, good to have you back. It's going to be an interesting one today. Well, to support the channel, you just need to watch the channel, and the like and subscribe button let other people know that you've enjoyed the content, as YouTube will push it out a bit more. And further to that, there's a few links in the description if you feel inclined. But for now, let's get nice and relaxed. Talk about the life of Elagabalus today. Well, it was either 203 or perhaps early 204 that Elagabalus was born to one Sextus Varius Marcellus and Julia Soaemias Bassiana, who were likely married around the year of 200. Now, his complete birth name, of course his real name was not Elagabalus, was most likely Varius Avitus Bassianus. Now, with that last name seemingly being a cognomen associated with the Emesa dynasty. Well, Marcellus initially held the rank of an equestrian, which is not bad, but he was later promoted to a senatorial position, which is of course better. Julia Soemias, a relative of the Emperor Caracalla, was rumored to be the mother of Elagabalus, a claim that Soemias herself later publicly endorsed. Now, the tombstone of Marcellus provides evidence that Elagabalus had a sibling, but unfortunately, there is very little information available. Julia Maesa, the grandmother of Elagabalus, was the widow of Julius Avitus Alexianus, who held the position of consul. So there were certainly a few people within both sides of the family that were in decent positions of power. Well, she was also the sister of Julia Domna, and the sister-in-law of the Emperor Septimius Severus. Elagabalus had other relatives too, of course, namely his aunt Julia Avita Mamea, his uncle Marcus Julius Gessius Marcianus, and their son Severus Alexander. Now Elagabalus belonged to the Arab Emesene dynasty, and was the high priest of the sun god Elagabal in Emesa, that is, by the way, modern-day Homs in Roman Syria. Well, I suppose it's just Syria now. It was Roman Syria back then. The priesthood of Elagabal was passed down through Elagabalus's family, a hereditary position. Pretty normal. Now the Latin name of the deity, Elagabalus, is a Latinized adaptation of the Arabic Ilah al-Jabal, derived from Ilah, God, and Jabal, mountain. So, God plus mountain equals God of the mountain, if my mathematics is correct. Thus the name represents the Emesene manifestation of the old god Baal. Well, the deity was first worshipped in Emesa, but later the cult expanded to other regions of the Roman Empire during the 2nd century, a very exciting time for new religions cropping up. Evidence of this expansion can be seen in a dedication discovered in Woerden, located near the Roman limes in the Netherlands. Subsequently, the deity was brought to Rome and integrated with the solar deity called Sol Indiges during the Roman Republic period, and later with the more recognizable Sol Invictus in the late 3rd century. But the sun god in Greek, of course. Can you guess his name? Helios. Good job if you got it right. You know, we talk about that word from Greek, the heliocentric model of the universe, this sort of thing. Whenever you hear helio something, it's always to do with the sun. Well, therefore, Elagabalus was later referred to as Heliogabalus, which is a combination of the names Helios and Elagabalus. Once again, quick maths. Well, according to Herodian, Emperor Macrinus effectively dealt with the potential challenge to his rule posed by the family of his murdered predecessor, Caracalla, by banishing them. Of course, Caracalla was, well, he was not quite a very popular emperor either. We'll get to him later, in another video. Julia Maesa, her 2 daughters, and her eldest grandson Elagabalus were sent into exile at their property in Emesa, Syria, and upon reaching Syria, Maesa immediately conspired with her advisor and Elagabalus's tutor, Gannus, to overthrow Macrinus and install the 14-year-old Elagabalus as the emperor. Well, Maesa promoted a rumor, which Soemias openly endorsed, asserting that Elagabalus was the illegitimate offspring of Caracalla and therefore merited the allegiance of Roman soldiers and senators who had pledged their loyalty to Caracalla. The soldiers of the 3rd Legion Gallica, stationed in Rafana, who had previously received more favorable treatment under Caracalla and harbored quite a bit of resentment towards Macrinus. Well, they may have been influenced or bribed by Maesa's wealth, too, to back the assertion, but, well, like I always say, a bit of money to grease the wheels always helps in these sorts of situations. Peel back the layers. You'll always find the deals under the table. On the morning of May 16th, 218, Elagabalus was officially proclaimed emperor by Publius Valerius Comazon, the legion's commander. In order to enhance his credibility, Elagabalus decided to assume the same imperial name as Caracalla, which was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. According to Cassius Dio, certain officers attempted to maintain the soldiers' allegiance to Macrinus, but it didn't work. Futile efforts, unfortunately. Praetorian prefect Ulpius Julianus retaliated by launching an assault on the 3rd Legion, presumably under the directive of Macrinus, although one source suggests he acted independently prior to Macrinus's awareness of the rebellion. Herodian implies that Macrinus failed to fully grasp the magnitude of the threat and regarded the rebellion as insignificant, a shrug of the shoulders. How far could they really make it? Well, amidst the conflict, the soldiers under Julianus's command assassinated their superiors, and then even they aligned themselves with Elagabalus's troops. And just like that, the ball was rolling. Macrinus requested the Roman Senate condemn Elagabalus as the false Antoninus, and they acquiesced, initiating hostilities against Elagabalus and his kin. Macrinus appointed his son Diadumenian as co-emperor, and endeavored to ensure the allegiance of the 2nd Legion by offering substantial monetary incentives. At a banquet held in Apamea to commemorate this occasion, a messenger delivered to Macrinus the decapitated head of the vanquished prefect Julianus. Consequently, Macrinus thought it was probably best to withdraw to Antioch, following which the 2nd Legion transferred its allegiance to Elagabalus too. Not looking good for him, isn't it? Well, on the 8th of June 218, Gannus, leading Elagabalus's legionaries, emerged victorious in the Battle of Antioch against Macrinus, Diadumenian, and their Praetorian Guard. Macrinus's troops lost their formation and scattered after he fled the battlefield. He then attempted to travel to Italy, but he was intercepted in the vicinity of Chalcedon and subsequently executed in Cappadocia. Similarly, Diadumenian was apprehended in Zeugma and similarly put to death. Can't get away with anything anymore, can't you? Well, in that particular month, Elagabalus sent a letter to the Senate, where he assumed the imperial titles without waiting for their approval, thus breaking with tradition. although this was a common practice among emperors in the 3rd century, but, the 3rd century was a little bit different, and certainly was a time where traditions were broken. Well, dispatched to Rome were letters of reconciliation, which offered amnesty to the Senate and acknowledged its laws, while also denouncing the governance of Macrinus and his son. Well, what choice did they have? The senators acquiesced by recognizing Elagabalus as the emperor and validating his assertion of being the child of Caracalla. Elagabalus was appointed as consul in June 218. Both Caracalla and Julia Domna were granted divine status by the Senate, and similarly both Julia Mesa and Julia Soemias were promoted to the esteemed rank of Augustae. Additionally, the Senate erased any remembrance of Macrinus. Statues? Gone. See you later. Well, of course, this would happen to Elagabalus too, but, that's for later. Well, Elagabalus's imperial artifacts indicate that he directly succeeded Caracalla. Now, whether this was changed afterwards to fit the narrative or simply discovered, we don't quite know. But it seems that whatever Elagabalus had said, all of it was starting to conveniently show up some form of evidence. Oh, look at this old dusty tablet we just pulled out of the drawer. It has my name on it. See? How convenient. Not making any accusations against our friend Elagabalus. I'm just making observations. Do forgive me. Well, Comazon was designated as the commander of the Praetorian Guard, and you needed a good commander of the Praetorian Guard you could trust, because they killed quite a few emperors themselves once they became impatient with them. Elagabalus was bestowed the title of Pater Patriae by the Senate prior to July the 13th, 218, and on July the 14th he was officially admitted into all Roman priesthoods. That includes the College of Pontiffs, where he was appointed as Pontifex Maximus, the top job. He temporarily resided in Antioch, seemingly to suppress multiple uprisings. Cassius Dio enumerates several events, which historian in modern times Fergus Miller situates before the winter of 218 to 219. Among these accounts, one of them was written by Gellius Maximus, the commander of the 4th Legion, who was subsequently executed. Another was authored by Verus, the commander of the 3rd Legion Gallica, which was dissolved after the rebellion was suppressed. According to Herodian, Elagabalus and his group stayed in Bithynia at Nicomedia during the winter of 218 to 219. They then journeyed through Thrace and Moesia to Italy in the first half of 219, which was the year of Elagabalus's 2nd consulship. According to Herodian, Elagabalus allegedly arranged for a painting of himself to be transported to Rome and displayed above a statue of the goddess Victoria in the Senate House. The purpose of this was to prevent people from being taken aback by his attire, which was influenced by Eastern culture, not the typical get-up for a Roman emperor. But you spend a couple of months in Antioch. You're bound to get used to it. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, and, well, when in Syria, you know how it goes. However, it does remain uncertain whether such a painting truly existed. In fact, Cassius Dio does not make any reference to it. And if the painting was indeed displayed above Victoria, it placed senators in a situation where they appeared to be making offerings to Elagabalus instead of the goddess when they made their religious ceremonies, which of course presents a bit of a problem. And, well, I'm sure Victoria would not be very happy about it either. While en route to Rome, Elagabalus and his allies carried out the execution of several influential backers of Macrinus, including Fabius Agrippinus, the governor of Syria, and Claudius Attalus Patercullianus, the former governor of Thrace. In August or the early September of 219, Elagabalus finally arrived at the imperial capital and performed an adventus, which you've probably seen in the movies. You know, when the emperor comes back, the gates open, everyone lines the streets, throws the rose petals. It's a ceremonial entrance to the city. It's a big event. That is the adventus. Well, in Rome, the majority of the Roman upper class accepted his offer of amnesty, although the jurist Ulpian was forced into exile. Elagabalus appointed Comazon as the Praetorian prefect, and subsequently as consul in 220, and prefect of the city on 3 occasions from 220 to 222. Dio considered this to be a breach of Roman customs. In 220, Elagabalus personally served as a consul for the 3rd consecutive year, and according to Herodian and the Augustan history, he caused dissatisfaction among many people by granting influential positions to his allies, basically rounding up all of his best friends and giving them all the best jobs. Well, we're sure glad that that has never happened again in politics. Spoiler alert, it happens all the time. Well, anyway, he constructed the imperial palace at Horti Spe Veteris by incorporating the adjacent land that he had inherited from his father, Sextus Varius Marcellus. This location was chosen as his preferred getaway, and he constructed it similar to Nero's Domus Aurea project, as an expansive suburban villa consisting of multiple buildings and landscaped areas. It was the highest luxury at the time, the greatest home that one could have imagined. Well, he included the Amphitheatrum Castrense, which he personally built, as well as the Circus Vallianus Hippodrome, showing his intense fascination with circuses and his habit of driving chariots within the villa. He actually competed in chariot races too, and he used the family name Varius. Cassius Dio goes on to assert that Elagabalus expressed a desire to wed a charioteer named Hierocles and appoint him as Caesar, similar to his previous intention to marry Gannys and designate him as Caesar. Dio reports that the athlete Aurelius Zoticus had a romantic relationship with Elagabalus and served as his cubicularius, which is a non-administrative position. I'm sure he was very busy. Well, however, according to the Augustan history, Zoticus was not only Elagabalus's husband, but he also held significant political power. Initially, Elagabalus had strong relationships with his mother, Julia Suemias, and grandmother Julia Maesa. They were influential allies right from the start, but Macrinus, along with Elagabalus, declared war on them. Consequently, they were the initial women granted access to the Senate, and each of them obtained senatorial designations. Soemias received the recognized title of Clarissima, while Maesa was given the unconventional title of Mater Castrorum et Senatus, meaning Mother of the Army Camp and of the Senate. Throughout his reign, they exerted significant influence over the young emperor, and their presence can be observed on numerous coins and inscriptions, a distinction rarely bestowed upon Roman women. Well, during Elagabalus's reign, the Roman aurei and denarii experienced a gradual decrease in value, with the silver purity of the denarius dropping from 58 to 46%, and that's a huge drop. However, Antonini coins had a higher metal content compared to the time of Caracalla. Since the rule of Septimius Severus, the veneration of the sun had grown in popularity across the entire empire. In 220, Elagabalus officially designated Elagabal as the principal god of the Roman pantheon, potentially coinciding with the winter solstice. Elagabalus held the official title of Pontifex Maximus, and the full title was quite convoluted. It was highest priest of the unconquered god, the sun Elagabal, supreme pontiff. They've got a full Latin name, but I'll spare you and myself the trouble. It's quite long. Well, the fact that a deity from another country was being worshipped more than Jupiter, with Elagabalus serving as the main priest. You can imagine how well this sat with many Romans. Surprised, at best, disgusted, at worst. And I would say that most people were of course quite worried too, that this would bring forth some kind of divine retribution. Well, in order to show respect for the Roman religion, Elagabalus chose to associate either Astarte, Minerva, Urania, or a combination of the three as a consort to Elagabal. An alliance between Elagabal and a conventional goddess would have effectively enhanced the connection between the emerging religion and the imperial cult. There might have been a deliberate attempt to replace Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva with Elagabal, Urania, and Athena as the new Capitoline triad of Rome. Well, it wasn't enough that he caused this ruckus. He caused quite a lot more dissatisfaction when he wedded Aquilia Severa, a Vestal virgin, who was the high priestess of Vesta, and asserted that their marriage would result in offspring with divine qualities, basically birthing demigods, like what we have with the legendary Hercules and Perseus, this kind of thing. And of course this was not on. You couldn't just go around making these sorts of claims, a blatant violation of Roman law and tradition, which dictated that any Vestal found to have participated in sexual intercourse was to be burned or buried alive. Well, an opulent sanctuary known as the Elagabalium was constructed on the eastern slope of the Palatine Hill to accommodate Elagabal, who was symbolized by a dark conical meteorite originating from Emesa. According to Herodian, the stone is venerated as if it were a divine gift. It has some small protrusions and markings the people interpret as a crude representation of the sun, which they believe to be, once again, divinely ordained. Dio reports that Elagabalus, in his pursuit of greater devotion as the high priest of Elagabal in the new Roman pantheon, underwent circumcision and made a solemn vow to refrain from consuming pork. And may I remind you, no anesthetics back then, unless you got extremely drunk. Still, that would not good for anybody involved. Well, he compelled the senators to observe as he performed a dance, encircling the altar of Elagabal, accompanied by the rhythmic sounds of drums and cymbals, which I'm sure everybody was very impressed. Every year on the summer solstice he organized a festival in honor of the deity, which did actually gain popularity among the general public, due to the distribution of complimentary food during these events, but it seems more like a bribe to get people to show up. During the festival, Elagabalus placed the black stone on a chariot that was decorated with gold and jewels. He then proceeded to parade the chariot through the city. The divinity was transported in a chariot pulled by 6 majestic horses, which were remarkably large and perfectly white. The horses were adorned with luxurious golden accessories and opulent decorations. There was no one controlling the reins or riding in the chariot. The vehicle was accompanied as if the deity himself was in control, and Elagabalus exhibited a retrograde motion, positioning himself in front of the chariot, directly facing the deity and firmly grasping the reins of the horses. He completed the entire journey in this inverted manner, gazing upwards into the face of his deity. The holiest artifacts of the Roman religion were relocated from their individual sanctuaries to the Elagabalium. These included the symbol of the Great Mother, the eternal flame of Vesta, the sacred shields of the Sali, and the Palladium. This was done to ensure that no other deity could be worshipped independently of Elagabal. Despite facing widespread ridicule from his contemporaries, the native cult practiced by him gained popularity among the soldiers, and was subsequently endorsed by several emperors in the future. The inquiry into Elagabalus's sexual orientation and gender identity is muddled due to quite a few sensational and untrustworthy sources. According to Cassius Dio, Elagabalus had a total of 5 marriages, including one instance where he married the same woman twice. He had also 3 wives in succession. His first wife, Julia Cornelia Pola, was married to him before the 29th of August 219. However, between that date and the 28th of August 220, he divorced her and married Julia Aquilia Severa, the Vestal Virgin which we mentioned earlier. But he later divorced Severa and married a third wife, Annia Aurelia Faustina. According to Herodian, Faustina was a descendant of Marcus Aurelius and the widow of Pomponius Bassus, a man whom Elagabalus had recently executed. Imagine that. Somebody kills your husband, and then as your husband is looking down from wherever he is, says, "Don't worry, darling, I'll watch over you. Hey, what are you doing marrying the man who just killed me?" Salt in the wound. Well, during the final year of his reign, Elagabalus terminated his marriage with Annia Faustina and entered into a new marital union with Aquilia Severa. Dio asserts that Hierocles, a former slave and chariot driver from Caria, was another spouse of Elagabalus. According to the Augustan history, Elagabalus is also said to have married a man named Zoticus, who was an athlete from Smyrna. However, Dio mentions that Zoticus served Elagabalus as cubicularius. Dio asserts that Elagabalus engaged in the act of selling himself within taverns and brothels, also the palace itself. Wild claims, which lead some people to raise a few eyebrows. It's very easy to write that sort of thing after somebody is dead and gone. Of course, that doesn't mean that it's not true. It's just a pretty bold claim. Well, some authors propose that Elagabalus potentially identified as a female, and he may have even pursued sexual reassignment surgery. Dio asserts that Elagabalus derived great pleasure from being referred to as Hierocles' mistress, wife, or queen, and according to reports, the emperor adorned himself with cosmetics and an artificial wig, expressing a preference for being addressed as a lady rather than a lord, and allegedly offered significant amounts of money to any doctor who could surgically make his dream a reality, without going into too much detail. Several historians, such as Mary Beard, Zachary Hers, and Martin Ix, approached these accounts with quite a bit of skepticism. It's mainly because the sources for Elagabalus' life were often biased against him and not reliable. But it does make one wonder, if they were going to level accusations, why these accusations in particular? It wasn't like you couldn't just say that he was a cruel and terrible emperor and nobody liked him. That was usually the treatment that most got. That he wasted public money and was blasphemous, all the rest. But these specific allegations. Now, one thing that we could say, if he did have some feminine proclivities, perhaps they sort of took the ball and ran with it. Said, well, maybe we can tack some other things on to make him seem like he was this way or that way, and to sort of tar him in the eyes of the conservative Roman leadership and the general public too. Well, moving on. Now, in November 2023, the North Hertfordshire Museum in Hitchin, United Kingdom, actually made an announcement stating that Elagabalus would be recognized as transgender, and therefore addressed using female pronouns in his exhibits. But that basically means that whenever they would write his name down, instead of saying his, they would say her, or they would use she instead of him. Well, this decision was based on claims that the emperor had expressed the desire to be referred to as a lady rather than a lord. I'm not sure if that museum is still doing that. I assume that they still are. Not sure what exhibits they have. Well, he also incited the hostility of Roman elites in the Praetorian Guard, not just due to this behavior we just mentioned, but the foreignness of it. It seemed like he was just not very Roman. Added to that with a sprinkling of those religious provocations, more than a few raised eyebrows. Well, upon observing the decline in popular support for Emperor Elagabalus, his grandmother Julia Maesa concluded that it was necessary to replace him and his mother, who had supported his religious ideas. Instead, she sought out her other daughter, Julia Avitus Bassianus, and her grandson, the 15-year-old Severus Alexander, as possible options. She successfully persuaded Elagabalus to designate his cousin Alexander as his successor, and bestow upon the young boy the title of Caesar. Alexander was promoted to the rank of Caesar in June of 221, potentially on the 26th of that month. Elagabalus and Alexander were both appointed as consul designatus for the upcoming year. Elagabalus assumed his fourth consulship in the year 222, and Alexander co-shared the consulship with the emperor during that particular year. But nevertheless, Elagabalus reassessed this agreement when he started to harbor suspicions that the Praetorian Guard exhibited a preference for his cousin over him. Well, he orchestrated multiple assassination attempts on Alexander, but he was unable to secure the Senate's consent to remove Alexander's shared title. Dio reports that Elagabalus fabricated the rumor of Alexander's impending demise with the intention of observing the Praetorians' response. Well, either way, a riot broke out, prompting the guard to demand the presence of Elagabalus and Alexander at the Praetorian camp right away. On the 13th of March, the emperor acquiesced and publicly introduced his cousin, along with his own mother, Julia Soemias. Upon their arrival, soldiers enthusiastically cheered for Alexander, while completely disregarding Elagabalus. In response, Elagabalus commanded the immediate arrest and execution of all individuals involved in this act of defiance. As a reaction, the Praetorian Guard assaulted Elagabalus and his mother. Well, he tried to escape, and he would have succeeded by hiding in a little chest, but he was found and killed. He was only 18 years old. His mother, who was hugging him tightly at the time, died alongside him, and their heads were severed, and their bodies, after being stripped, were dragged throughout the city. The mother's body was discarded somewhere along the road, while his body was thrown into the Tiber River. Well, after he was assassinated, numerous associates of his were either executed or removed from power. The purges were about to begin. It's always that way when an emperor gets assassinated. Well, old Heracles, remember him? He was put to death, and quite quickly too. The religious decrees he issued were also overturned, and the Elagabal stone, well, luckily they didn't destroy it, but they did return it to Emesa, sending it back home. It's funny, and kind of ironic, that the thing that had caused so much trouble actually got the most fair treatment, sent safely on its way completely undamaged. But poor old Heracles, well, he was put to death in a very violent manner, one can assume. Well, it wasn't all good news, though. Women were once again prohibited from attending Senate meetings, back to the old days. Well, in his case, the practice of damnatio memoriae, which involves deliberately erasing any mention or memory of a disgraced individual who was once prominent, was immediately implemented, and they wasted no time. Various images, including a statue of him as Hercules that is larger than life and currently located in Naples, were modified by replacing the original face with that of Alexander Severus. Well, just before we finish up, where exactly do we get all of this information from? Let's talk about the ancient sources before we go. An account of Elagabalus in great detail was written by, I'm sure you know, Cassius Dio, and he lived from around 229 CE to the middle of the 2nd century. Dio, hailing from aristocratic lineage, dedicated a significant portion of his life to serving the public, and he held the position of senator during the reign of Emperor Commodus, later becoming the governor of Smyrna after the death of Septimius Severus. Subsequently, he served as suffect consul around 205, and held the positions of proconsul in Africa and Pannonia. Dio's Roman history covers a period of almost 1,000 years. It's very extensive, starting from the arrival of Aeneas in Italy and ending in the year 229. Dio's contemporaneous record of Elagabalus's reign is widely regarded as more trustworthy than the Augustan history or other accounts from the same era. However, it's important we remember Dio himself acknowledges that he was mostly absent from Rome during this period and had to rely completely on second-hand information. Well, moreover, the politics following the rule of Elagabalus, along with Dio's prominent role in the government of Severus Alexander, who held him in great regard and reinstated him as consul, probably had a negative impact on the accuracy of this particular section of his historical account. Dio frequently uses the name Sardanapalus to refer to Elagabalus, and this is done partly to differentiate him from the god with the same name, but mainly to contribute the condemnation of his memory, and to link him with another ruler who was also known for a equally debauched lifestyle. Well, Dio's account has been characterized by some modern historians, namely Claire Rowan, as dependable information mixed with literary hyperbole, highlighting that Elagabalus's marriages and tenure as consul are verified by numismatic and epigraphical records, and Dio's account is flawed in certain cases. For example, he incorrectly claims that Elagabalus appointed completely unqualified officials, and that Comazon lacked military experience before being appointed as the head of the Praetorian Guard. But in reality, Comazon had previously commanded the 3rd Legion, and that certainly counts as experience. The 3rd Legion is no joke. Dio provides varying narratives in different locations regarding the timing and individuals responsible for bestowing imperial names and titles upon Diadumenian, whom Elagabalus battled against. It's also been stated that Dio's portrayal of the emperor was not intended to be accurate, and this is a viewpoint supported by a few modern historians, namely Martin Ix and Josiah Osgood. Well, Herodian, a Roman civil servant, lived from approximately 170 to 240. and that makes him a direct contemporary of Elagabalus. The book, titled History of the Roman Empire since Marcus Aurelius, often referred to as Roman history, provides a first-hand narrative of the rule of Commodus up until the start of Gordian III's reign. The work of the author significantly coincides with Dio's Roman history. Although the texts were written independently, they frequently occur regarding Elagabalus and his brief yet eventful rule. It's possible that Herodian utilized Dio's work as a reference for certain aspects of his narrative concerning Elagabalus. Now, lastly, the Historia Augusta serves as the primary source for numerous accounts of Elagabalus's immoral behavior. Well, although it is important to note that some of these claims are subject to controversy, the Historia Augusta was probably composed in the late 4th century, during the rule of Emperor Theodosius I. The historical accuracy of the account of Elagabalus in the Historia Augustus is uncertain. Historians generally agree that sections 13 to 17, which discuss the downfall of Elagabalus, are less disputed. The author of the most scandalous narratives in the Historia Augusta acknowledges that both these events and certain other incredulous accounts were, in my opinion, fabricated by individuals seeking to discredit Elagabalus in order to gain favor with Alexander. The Historia Augusta is commonly attributed to a sole author, who employed various pseudonyms throughout the text. This author has been characterized as a fantasist who fabricated significant portions of the historical narratives. And with that being said, can you really believe anything I've just told you? I suppose it all boils down to keeping an open mind. We're not going to get too bogged down. This is a YouTube channel, not a university classroom. Of course, the comments are the best peer review. But every aspect of Elagabalus, whether it be alleged or proven, I think it's worth talking about, regardless of how out there it seems. Well, if you are out there listening, thank you very much. I've tried to approach some of the topics in this with the most gentle wording that I could. Do keep that in mind. I'd like to thank my top-tier patrons, Britt, Charles, Stark Factory, JC, Jeffrey, Wendy, Tim, James, Aaron, Scott, Dark, Ben, Melissa, and Kerry. Thank you kindly for joining me, and I will see you next time. Look after yourselves, and lots of love to you all.